welcome to the Business Intelligence Competency Center webinar. I'm Kelsey, the Marketing Associate here at eCapital Advisors. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have Mike Jellin, the Senior Consultant here at eCapital Advisors, on the line, and we will hear from him in just First, just a little introduction of who we are. eCapital Advisors is a Twin Cities-based consulting firm specializing in business intelligence and enterprise performance management. We have been in business for over 11 years, helping over 150 organizations design and implement solutions throughout the Midwest. We also have consultants located across the U.S. So with that, I will hand the floor over to Mike.
Thank you, Kelsey. Yes, Mike Jellin. I oversee our BI practice here at eCapital. And today we have the Building a BI Competency Center, and on our agenda we have a number of different topics here. We're going to start with the foundation of when we say BI, business intelligence, what are we really referring to? What are some of the approaches that customers are taking out there in the marketplace? And really, what is a BI Competency Center? Why should you even be considering the Competency Center? What are some of the the details around the Competency Center from a deliverables, and what are you trying to effectively do within your organization? And then how do you measure the success or the impact of that Competency Center here? And of course, open it up for questions and answers a bit later here. But I do thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us around building a BI Competency Center. So let's go ahead and get started and dive into what exactly is business intelligence. Well, there's a number of different aspects to business intelligence, and part of it your journey in the BI realm here. And so each of you may be in one of these three phases. And there's three different kind of phases or categories that we look at BI within an organization. The first one is really around efficiency, making sure you are doing the current things right. Well, you're consolidating tools. Maybe you have a number of reporting and analytical tools within your organization. It's getting a little bit out of control, hard to manage, hard to understand, well, where should I be going for certain information? Numbers aren't matching up across these different tools. When you say revenue or headcount, people are coming up with slightly different definitions. It takes a very long time in order to pull information into your BI slash reporting tool. The next category is really effectiveness. You're looking to do things, you want to do the right thing. So not just doing the current things right, but all right, what things should we be doing? We can all spend a tremendous amount of effort on staying busy and completing a lot of tasks, projects, but really, is that the best thing for the company? Does that really align with where our company is going, and does it really add the most value? Of course, we're all stretched for time and resources here, so this is kind of the next level. You've gotten past the tool consolidation, but are we really doing the right things? And really coming up with this enterprise model. All right, we need to have an enterprise tool. We need to have an enterprise data warehouse this is going to be the single source of truth. And then you have transformational, and this is by far the level of ambition. You have an entire organization that's rallying around either a new business line. You may be starting a new business line, or perhaps you've acquired a company that's the same size, or it's very large, it could be the same size as your organization, or maybe it's a little bit bigger, and you're trying to really integrate those two companies and figure out how are we going to do business different. So you're redoing your business processes, and you're looking at how does our technology align, and how do we support those processes in our business through BI. And so each of those, of course, have different levels of effort. But then, of course, the bigger you get and the further you go from efficiency to transformational, the larger the impact and the overall added value that you're adding to your organization here. So just to level set where we're at when we talk about business intelligence, we're really looking at all three of these, because the Competency Center plays a very key and important role regardless of which of the three that you're in. All right, so we talked about just generally where you're at with kind of your BI transformation here or implementation. Then we have a couple of approaches. So when we look at how do we look at BI? There's a traditional approach of, well, we have some people, we have some processes, let's figure out the technology, and then we'll determine, do we need more people, do we need to tweak our processes to fit? So you have this 360-degree circle, and it's never ending. Organizations can do fine in this approach. However, it's not really the leading practice as to where your organization should be and where your organization needs to be, especially from a distinct competitive advantage within the marketplace. So that's where we have the information-centric approach. Yes, people, process, and technology still play a very key and important role, of course, but you're really rallying around information. All the data is shared amongst the people, technology, and processes. You're taking this holistic approach. And this is where we as an organization drive our customers to, in general, we want every customer to be here because we know that information-led organization, like I said, has that distinct competitive advantage. And so the Competency Center plays a very key role of gluing the people, process, and technology together and turning the data really into information that everybody can use across the organization in a holistic approach, not just creating a data warehouse and it becoming a complete dumping ground for every piece of data within an organization, and people are hitting it in any way, shape, or form that they want to. You need to apply consistency and standards and governance around that. And so that's where the Competency Center plays its very, very important and critical role within your organization. So really, what is a BI Competency Center? Well, at the end of the day, it's a team of business and IT people that they're getting together to promote, collaboration, coming up with standards and best practices, really across your organization to make that data more into information. The team itself can be formal or informal. When you're just starting out with a BI Competency Center, the chances of you being in the luxurious position of being able to have a dedicated team that has its own funding source, that the people are 100% dedicated to a competency center is very rare to have that. It really needs to grow into it. And so this becomes a part-time role for folks within an organization. And really the purpose of them is to get together on a regular basis, to talk about what are we doing from our overall BI standards and best practices, and to remember that this is not easy. I mean, getting business and IT to come together, to come up with standards, and really take this from an IT-driven initiative. This really needs to be a business-driven, business-led initiative within your organization, and the BI Competency Center is the start to having the business drive BI. And so, again, the Competency Center itself is not responsible for the development. You're not going to have your developers talking about deep issues and saying, okay, here's our release. Let's make sure everyone in the room is testing their bugs and coming up with feedback. This group is at a higher level than that. Yes, there is going to be a team that will be a team of developers, whether it's on the IT and the business side, and that's great. It needs to be there. But this is really the Competency Center that helps glue everything together here. Because the Competency Center also is going to talk about data availability. What are some of the SLAs and the expectations with the data? What is that 2-3 year roadmap for BI projects to help communicate that out to the larger organization? But the key is the Competency Center is not given that roadmap. The Competency Center creates that roadmap. So that way it's a joint collaborative effort between the business and IT that ultimately, at the end of the day, this Competency Center is driven by the business. So, not only is it setting standards, but then you also have to look back and really critique yourself. Is BI taking off and doing what BI is supposed to be doing within our organization? So you want to be constantly looking for improvements in how you are releasing projects, as to how you're taking data from different sources and marrying it up? Is it really taking the the needs of all the different stakeholders throughout your business into account and really bridging those gaps as to maybe marketing doesn't have all the data that it needs in order to do the full campaign analysis? Well, all right, great. We've got 2 out of the 3 main components that are needed for that campaign analysis or campaign effectiveness. But what are some other pieces here, and how do we look at that and bake that into the high-level roadmap? Of course, this high-level roadmap is not created within a vacuum within the Competency Center. Of course, it needs to take into account the company's strategic objectives, what are some of the the technical objectives for the company here too, and really marry it up together. But at the same time, again, it needs to have its own voice within the organization to be able to say, this is great, we're going this direction with this technology. This is great that we're doing this direction with our strategic objectives. How are we going to make all this work together and give the information out to all the different parties that need it? It's very easy to say, here is a new system that you're going to enter all your data in. Well, that's great. That's half the equation. How am I going to get data out? How am I going to report and analyze that particular data? How am I going to look for trends? How am I going to be able to take my planning information and marry that up with my actuals? Well, great. How are all of those different pieces going to happen? Because when you look across in your entire organization and all your different processes, tools, technology, and people, the Competency Center needs to be the glue to tie all that together and turn all of that data and all the different systems that support the processes and people and turn that into viable, actionable information. And that is where BI and the BI Competency Center plays its very important role. So some of the important considerations around the Competency Center here, you want to have an information strategy. Like I mentioned, you have data sitting all over your company in many different systems. What are the priorities and objectives of the company here? How can we take the data, turn it into information to support the overall priorities and objectives within your organization? And that's the key part here. Everyone can come up with 100 different projects that would maybe make their life a little bit easier, make their team or department's life a little bit easier. But how does that support the overall goals and objectives of the company? You also don't want to forget, we need to look at where we're at today. Going back to one of the first slides when we looked at the efficiency, effectiveness, and transformational stages of BI, you need to look at where you're at. What are you doing today? Do you need to do a tool consolidation first before you look at your enterprise? Are you looking at a business transformation because of an acquisition or a new product rollout within your organization here? Because then that's going to help you determine what do my short, medium, and long-term goals and objectives need to be. And of course, you need to have alignment within your organization. It takes obviously people on the business and IT side to make this happen, but you also need executive sponsorship and support as well. And we'll talk a bit about what does that really mean in a bit here, but that's really where alignment is coming to. And of course, we talked about the organizational and process changes depending upon doing reorgs, doing integration amongst companies here. And of course, once you have some of those key steps identified, thought through, discussed, you also need to look at, from the long-term perspective, where should we be? What are the leading industry practices for us? Where do we want to be as an organization? And you need to have that line in the sand to be able to have and put marching orders together for not only the Competency Center, but to help with all the different peripheral components, whether it's specific IT projects, specific process improvement projects here that are all going to get baked together. You need to think about where do you want to be. Of course, wherever you draw that line in the sand for the future, chances are that line is going to change, but it's much better having a line and a target and a plan to achieve a goal versus not having one at all. And you're just kind of willy-nilly operating as, well, we think and hope this is the right way to go. Change is inevitable. We all know that. We've been doing this for long enough that we all have to adapt and kind of go with the flow here. And of course, the governance model around the Competency Center. Again, what is the Competency Center going to do? What's it going to enforce from a standards perspective here? Where do you give flexibility to the larger audience so that it doesn't become this very rigid process that people, yes, they can follow, but it's very painful, it's very time-consuming. Now you've really deflated the overall importance and the role of the Competency Center within the organization. Of course, we want the Competency Center to take ownership. Like I mentioned, we want this to be a business-driven, business-led Competency Center here. But we also realize at the same time, if you're just starting a Competency Center, or if you're new to BI within your organization, it's going to take some time to get the BICC to have that ownership stake. So it might be an IT-led initiative at first here. Well, the goal isn't to have IT continually run that. IT typically starts with running the Competency Center because the BI tool falls in the IT department from a technology perspective. So it's only natural that the Competency Center may be led there, but in a very short period of time, the goal is to get the Competency Center to be self-sufficient, have your business and IT members that are part of that Competency Center, have them be self-sufficient, have them take over, and that's really when you start to see even more power in the Competency Center and really taking data and transforming that into information, because the Competency Center has the power, it has the standards, and it has the communication in place to say, here is my 2 to 3 year plan, here's the different groups, here's what you're generally going to be getting in the 2 to 3 years down the road. Of course, we know that plan is flexible when planning that far in the future. However, at the same time, the Competency Center needs to take all those pieces into account and then make sure it's all communicated to all the parties within the group and then outside the group as well. So let's look at some of the deliverables to establish the Competency Center. We talked at a high level. Generally, here's all the strategic things that the Competency Center should do. Well, what do you do once you say, yes, let's build a Competency Center? Well, first off, I mentioned a little bit earlier that you need an executive sponsor. And that is a very, very important piece here. And we'll dive into that a little bit here. Of course, once you identify your executive person, that's going to be the person in your organization that's going to carry the quote-unquote big stick to be able to really enforce, change, help, educate some of the other executives in the organization. What is BI? How should you be thinking about BI versus maybe your traditional reporting that you're used to, whether that's green bar reporting, access reporting with 50 metrics and 5,000 rows. All right, that's great. You've done well with that. That still might be important, but how do we look at the next level, and how do we look at all the things that you're doing on that detail level and get that out to the larger enterprise? The charter itself is going to establish really overall what are the goals and objectives of the Competency Center. It's also going to have your member roles and responsibilities. It's great everyone's part of a team, but there definitely are expectations need to be set. What is the Competency Center really going to do? Who's the individual folks that are within the organization? What's the time commitment? What's the role expectation when they're part of it? I also mentioned what's that 2 to 3 year release schedule. Again, high level, things can change and adapt as the company evolves, but you need having something out there, even though it's not going to be 100% when you get to the end of year 3 and look back. Well, that's okay. You still need a vehicle in order to communicate out to the larger audience. And of course, you need to have a feedback process. Yes, internally you're going to look at yourself and you say, what can we do better? What are some of the lessons learned? But you need to ask the larger audience as well. When you roll out projects, you want to ask them, all right, great, now they're rolled out in production. What do you think of the process and the approach that we went through? Did the end result meet up with what you were expecting? Did we meet the goals and objectives at the high level before the project started here? And of course, part of the feedback is also naturally there's going to be changes. Some of those changes are, there's data situations that didn't happen to come up in the test data. Now that we're in production, there's a unique scenario that needs to be addressed. Or what typically happens is people, they see the information for the first time and they say, wow, if you could add this additional metric to what you just delivered, this would make this report even more beneficial. Or maybe it's a set of pages and reports that need to get added to the information that was delivered the first time around. You need to have a mechanism in place in order to capture that information, to be able to discuss that information within the Competency Center, and then communicate back. So this needs to be a 360-degree process, from a feedback to a change request approach here. Of course, we mentioned standards. There's tons of standards within any BI tool. You can do a million different things with a pie chart, with a bar chart, with a pivot table. And that's great that you can do that, but at the end of the day, you want to have consistency across your BI application. So when you look at a pivot table, everyone generally understands what are the rules around a pivot table. Or even from when you look at a dashboard perspective here, you might say your dashboard could have a number of pages. Well, you really want to have one report on each page. Well, that seems a little bit inefficient. What are some of the rules and expectations around not only having the report on a page, but then looking at prompts, the way that you can slice and dice that individual report? You need to have some sort of processes in place, and that's another key part of the Competency Center. And of course, not to be ignored is the training plan. When you roll out a BI tool or you just introduce new people to a BI tool, you want to have an appropriate training in place for the different groups of users. Executives, they're going to need one level of training. Your end users might need a similar but different training plan as well. And of course, your power users, your support staff, and your IT developers, it's going to be a lot more hands-on technical. We're going to have some ad hoc reporting, but you need to have a training plan put in place. And the way that we recommend having the training plan is everybody needs to go through some level of training before they get access to their BI tool. That's going to reduce your overall support costs, and that's going to increase your end user adoption. We found that in organizations that just roll out the tool and send somebody their login, tell them good luck, well, that doesn't always turn out so well. It's great to have a training plan, but it needs to be good training as well. And of course, you got to consider your external customers. Your external customers, they need a different level of training. They're going to need a different level of information relative to what you're going to have within your organization. So don't forget your external customers. Of course, for some of you, you may not have external customers, at least that are going to be accessing your BI tool. But for many of you out there, that might be a value-add service that you provide to your customers, giving them a BI set of dashboards and reports that you further communicate the business interaction between your two organizations. And so now you're exposing your BI environment to outside of the bounds of your organization. And that's a good thing. It's also it could be a revenue-generating thing or a way to differentiate yourself from amongst your competitors by providing this type of information. We mentioned the executive sponsor is very key and very important for the Competency Center. This really is one of those critical pillars to success. Having a senior level person, be VP, C-level individual that really is influential and respected within the organization, and they have true authority and power to make decisions based upon the recommendations within the Competency Center, to enforce those decisions, and to also help communicate out and educate those other executives within your organization. The worst thing that could happen is the Competency Center / BI, at the end of the day, because the Competency Center, if you look at it, is the head of BI within your organization. From a figurative perspective here, without a leader within that Competency Center here, BI just turns into a grassroots effort. And it stays grassroots, and it might get some traction, but it'll be looked at as a very tactical or operational type of a tool and process. So you want BI to be a strategic, very key to the success of your business not for selfish reasons, but for the reason that BI is the way that you turn all that data between your people, processes, and technology into information. And so BI can also, expose in a very positive way. It feels painful at first for some of you that have run into these challenges where BI is going to show you, well, here is the data within our ERP systems. Well, you might not like the data that's coming out of the ERP systems, and it's because of the way that either the process isn't being followed within the ERP system, or just maybe the data quality isn't as good as you thought within the ERP system. BI is going to expose that and force you to address and, of course, resolve it, but that's a very positive thing. You want your data to be better so it can be information. And when people do look at metrics based upon that information, especially across multiple source systems, that they know the data is accurate and it does truly represent the organization. So that's a very good thing. However, that requires change, and it requires people to think differently about their systems and data, and really what are they ultimately driving to within their business. That executive is very important. We have a number of different means to, one, identify that executive, and two, is court that executive as well. You want to talk to them and explain what is BI, what is the competency center, what are the expectations of the role, and really have an interview process, because once an executive finds out about what you're looking to do, it may or may not be interesting to that person, or vice versa. You might find out, well, this person seemed really good on the surface, but it seems like they really only care about their world within the organization. That's good that they care deeply about their part, but the executive from the BI Competency Center needs to care about the holistic organization itself here. They mentioned after the executive, building a charter. Again, really, what's the purpose? Why even do this competency center? What are the expectations for how often it's going to meet? People's roles and responsibilities. What are the goals that you're going to set with the charter? So, and again, you have to remember this needs to be a business push. Sure, at first it might feel like an IT push, just as the center is getting established. But over time, in a very short period of time, it should come full circle or shift 180 degrees so that the business becomes the driver for this competency center here. It really becomes a critical part of your organization. Then we have some optional deliverables for the competency center. You might decide, yes, these are important, but they really don't need to be the foundation of a competency center here. And the reason that they're optional is that they do need to get done. It's just whether the competency center is going to be the catalyst to get all these done. Or maybe the competency center says, these are things that need to be done, but the actual execution is outside of the competency center. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I was going to call out a couple of the key ones here. The customization log is very important. And at the end of the day, if it falls within the competency center, great. If not, then that's okay too. But the important part about a customization log is looking at why were certain things done within the data warehouse, within BI. Why is a metric or calculation done the way it is? What were some of the decision points around really the creation of that metric? And it might even be as simple as, why do we use this table and this column, or sets of tables and columns to come up with this metric? Well, there's a business justification for that. You need to track that, because over time, we're all super busy. We've got 4 million things on our plate. You're going to tend to forget all the root, intimate details. However, more likely than not, it'll come full circle and you'll be asked, or somebody will challenge, well, why did we do it this way? Well, the customization log can help recreate some of the decision-making process so you don't have to continually go through it. So one of the examples I like to use is, if you look at an organization that, when do you recognize a sale? Well, one is going to come down to, are you in finance or are you in sales? Your definition of when that you recognize the revenue is going to be a little bit different. From a sales perspective, you might say, well, once that order gets entered into my POS, that's when I'm going to recognize it as a sale. And finance will come back and say, I'm going to recognize that sale once we either we ship that product out, or another shipper takes it from our loading dock and they ship it. That is when I'm going to recognize the revenue. Well, you have to make decisions, especially in the early days of building out data warehouses and BI. Which definition are you going to support at first? Why are you going to do that? Of course, over time, you want to be able to cater to both audiences, so how do you evolve your warehouse to make that happen? Now, that's just one example that you'd want to have some sort of a log around that. And then there's a data journey playbook that we call it here. This is another one that is especially important for those folks that are used to working within their normal source system, maybe doing data entry, doing some light querying, but that's their world. Well, now you introduce them to BI and a new tool and a way to, essentially get information out of all of the data that's been entered in. You need to translate in their world, in their eyes, here's what's happening to this data, so that, and especially with those analysts that are in charge of really knowing the data, and they may even own the data itself here. This data journey playbook really helps those folks understand what's happening behind the scenes. How is data getting massaged in the data warehouse? How is data getting massaged in BI? And how do you translate back from what's on a report within BI back to their kind of normal everyday speak here. So those are just the two that I wanted to highlight real quick. The other ones are very important. You look at your testing and project methodology. Imagine that's very important for that. Your migration. You want to talk about, are you releasing things monthly, quarterly, annually? What does that look like? And of course, your metric guide. What are the calculations of all your metrics, and what does this mean from a business perspective? In your data management and data governance, what are your rules for pulling data out from different sources? How long are you going to keep the data around? How do you look at cleanliness, and how you look at hierarchical management of data? All those different pieces are very important for your BI journey. Just where does that fit in your organization? It's a little bit gray at that point too. So it's great you have a competency center, you got it up and running, you feel good that you're doing the right things, which you are here. How do you measure the success? How do you know if this competency center is even doing anything other than it feels good, we're getting together, people seem generally happy? Well, you've got to come up with ways to actually measure your effectiveness here. One, this helps justify what you're doing, and two, this also helps to really validate the importance and helps to provide some insight on where can we improve. Especially if you look at, you have your business measures and your operational measures is a good way to look at things here. So from a business measure, what are my cycle times? How long has this really taken to roll out different projects? If you said we're going to have a quarterly release schedule, are you actually meeting that? And is that meeting the business needs at the same time? For some organizations, quarterly sounds like it's heaven to be able to get new things released. Well, for other organizations, that might not be very good. Might be too slow. So you need to come up with what is the appropriate target, and then measure against that target. And we look at the analysis and decision-making time. Of course, there's going to be delivery of different reports, and you might have subject areas that you're going to further expose to some of the ad hoc users. Is it providing the information that they are looking for? Is it easy to find? Is it easy to build a query? And once they find that information, is that information meaningful to them? Is that really allowing them to answer the question that they're ultimately searching for the answer to? Customer satisfaction, getting that customer feedback, very important. We mentioned that a little bit earlier here. And then you just have what have you been delivering? How many dashboards, reports, subject areas, star schemas? Does that align with the overall plan that we had here, that you established at the beginning, and you continually look to evolve? Are you really delivering enough? You have to come up with ways to measure this here. And of course, when we say tool deprecation, if you're consolidating tools, and that's been your primary goal for BI within your organization, measure that. Are you really turning off all the tools that you thought, or is it a warm, fuzzy goal, but yet there's a group of people that, there's 5 people in an organization that will not get off this tool? Well, eventually, if that's one of the goals is to consolidate tools, you need to be able to, show proof of that, and that's especially where your executive sponsor can help play, referee or help go to bat and really have and leverage the power that he or she has within the organization. And then you're going to have some operational measures as well. What are bug fixes? Are we fixing them fast? How many have we resolved? And we know some bugs are larger than others, but it's still good to have a system or a process to measure that. The service level agreements, from an uptime perspective, from issue resolution, and then you're going to have your training. Of course, this is going to come back to the importance of training. Having training completed is going to help increase end user adoption, lower your total cost of ownership by not having as many calls come into the help desk, and also it's going to prevent the how do I log in or where do I go again for this information type of questions if you're training your people appropriately and giving them the necessary supporting training or documentation. But it's important to first remember you need to establish a baseline. Without a baseline, it's really hard to tell when you measure your business and operational measures here if you truly are improving or not. So at this time, we'd like to open it up for questions that people might have about building a competency center. And feel free, if you don't have a question, and if maybe you have just a general statement about competency centers of things that have worked well and haven't worked well, feel free to share those as well with the larger audience on the phone here. So Kelsey, could you please open up the webinar for Q&A?
Yep, the lines are unmuted.
All right, so anyone feel free to either ask a question or to, even if you have a statement about, like I said, what's worked well or not for your organization. All right, so we got a quiet bunch this morning, and that's okay. One question that came through is around the executive. I don't know where to start in identifying an executive within my organization. Well, that can be a challenge, depending upon really the goals of BI that have been established today, even if they're very loose goals around, well, we bought the tool because we got a great price on it from our vendor. Well, okay. Your next step is to really go through an exercise to just make a list of who are potential candidates within your organization. Just start writing names down, identify where the departments are, and then start to, within your own team or maybe your boss, your boss's boss, have a conversation with them. Say, all right, based upon these people within the organization, here's who I feel could be a good champion for BI within our company, and see if they agree or disagree or have some other names out there. That's going to help, leverage your boss or boss's boss to, help you identify who this person is as well. So, but it is a very key and very important part of your competency center is to identify that executive. Good question. Thank you. Any other questions out there? Let's see. Let me look. All right, we got one more question. This is a little bit different here, just in regards to. Let me read it here. What does, or is it important for BI to be a strategic objective for the CIO for BI to be successful? Well, this is a little bit outside of the competency center. However, it can play a role here. I mean, BI, traditionally, if you look CIO magazines and Gartner, you look at what are the CIO's top 10 responsibilities. BI in the last 5 to 7 years has traditionally been in the top 3 to 4 areas of concern. So, if that is not on your CIO's top list of priority, BI that is, I guess I'd be a little bit concerned as to what is trumping BI, and why. Try to understand, is the company going in the wrong direction overall, and they're trying to just maintain what you have and not have any more financial damage. I would argue that BI can help play a very positive role in investing in BI to make better decisions and to help right the ship within your organization here. So thank you for that. All right, if there aren't any final questions here, I do thank you for your time today. If you do happen to have any questions and want to ping us directly, our contact information is on the screen. You can always get a hold of us through our website or through any of our social connections out there. But thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day today, and look forward to additional webinars from eCapital Advisors coming up in the near future. Thank you.